Hi, welcome to the OC3 Audio Talk. I'm Pete Stirling, Audio Engineering Lead.
And I'm Tom Smurdon, the Audio Content Lead.
And today we're going to be talking about ambisonics and how you can use them in your games and interactive experiences. But before we get into that, we want to do a quick product update because it's been a really big year for Oculus and a really big year for audio as well. So we got our spatializer integrated into Unity and UE4 engines, and that's available out of the box. So if you download those engines, you've got our spatializer right there. It doesn't have the complete feature set, but it's got the basic spatialization, which is a really great starting point. We've also updated our Unity native plugin to our Unity plugin to include the native API that they introduced, which has better performance and a nicer interface to work with. And this has the complete feature set. So this includes our room model, which gives you those early reflections and late reverberation, which are critical for getting those distance cues. The other thing we've done across all of our plugins is expose the Oculus attenuation curve. So this is the attenuation curve we're using internally to attenuate those reflections and the reverberation. So by exposing this, you can now use it for your attenuation so that they balance the reflections perfectly. This prevents a situation when you're using an authored curve where it's quite shallow and you're not going to get the correct distance cues, because when something's far away, you want it to be reverberant, and when it's close, you want it to be really dry. When you have an authored curve, you can have a situation where the authored curve falls off really slowly, so in the distance it's still audible, but the reflections have fallen off completely. And that means it's completely dry at the distance, giving you the inverse distance cue to what you're expecting. So by exposing the internal curve, you can use that, or you can tweak our curve so it matches your authored curve, so you're getting the correct distance cues with a HRTF. The other thing is we've released our lip sync package. So this is based on some deep neural net work that's done over at Facebook, and it generates facial animations from audio streams. And this creates blend weights for animation morph targets, which means you can have a 3D model or a 2D flipbook animation driven completely by audio. And this is what we're using in all of our social experiences. And it really helps that level of connection, and it helps you engage with people when you're in a social experience and you can see their lips moving realistically with what they're saying. It really gives you that extra level of connection.
And that's what they were using in the keynote today when they showed the social experience that Mark demonstrated. That was all using our lip sync tech.
Yep, exactly. And that's available right now for free, and that's available as a Unity plugin. And it will probably be coming to more platforms soon. So we've also just launched our 1.1 SDK this week. It actually came out yesterday. And this has some big changes. So in the architecture, we've changed the reverb model. Previously, it worked as an insert, so each single sound source would have the reverb processed on it, even though it was the same room and the same response. So we've improved the efficiency by making it a shared reverb. So they now all send to this return that has the reverb processing on it, which gives you much better performance and is functionally equivalent to what it was. And it also is laying the groundwork to have a more sophisticated reverb model in the future. And this is available in all of our plugins. The other big new development is Ambisonics, and we've released this for Wise and Fmod, and Unity will be coming soon. We're going to talk in depth about that a bit later, but that's available right now as well. The other big thing is we added Rift support to our DAW plugin. So this allows you to pop on your Rift and actually see your sounds in your DAW without any game engine or level editor. You can just get in there and hear it in context, and we've got a video for you to show this.
So what this is showing you, so if you have our plugin in your DAW on all the different channels, each glowing ball over there is a different channel. You can grab them and pan and move things around you using the touch controllers. And so it's great because, like, let's say in Farlands, I was setting up a rocket ship and I was trying to figure out what the cockpit was going to sound like. So I built this all in the plugin, and I could move all the different point source audio pieces around me so I can just get a good feel, like just a preview before I put it in the game engine, what everything was going to sound like. You can also adjust the size of the room for reverb and early reflections just using the touch controllers with this. It works really well, and it's just a great starting point because then you have head tracking in your DAW as well. This works on was it VST and AAX, and it's always running there. It's super cheap, and so you just, like in the middle of a mix, you just pop on the headset and you're ready to go to start previewing things.
Yeah, it's really great to work with, and because you can use the touch controllers, it really gives you a really intuitive way to feel where the sounds are and to position them around you and hear what it's going to sound like using our spatializer. So this is a really valuable tool for auditioning and previewing spatialization and seeing how your sounds are going to translate into VR. There's also been a lot of happening on the hardware side, and this was touched on in the keynote, but we launched the Rift, and a shout out to David Tao, who's the hardware engineer on the audio side. Yeah, it's pretty incredible, and it was a lot of hard work and a lot of attention to detail. All the way from the high quality DAC to the custom tuned drivers, it was a real big effort to get it to the standard it is. And there's also the IEMs, which were also announced at the keynote, and all of you guys are going to get as part of the conference. And these are really great. As mentioned, these are really high quality. And we've got guys on our teams that are using this exclusively. And it gives those options. And quality is a real focus for Oculus on the software side and the hardware side. It's really important to have both at a really high standard. And having high quality on the hardware is a real shift from other mediums. When you consider mixing for other platforms or other mediums, say music or television, you've got a really wide variety of listening environments and listening equipment. So for music, you could be using earbuds on the bus, you could be listening in your car stereo, and when you make a mix, it needs to translate across all of these different listening environments. And then TV, you've got a similar problem where a lot of people are going to be using the integrated speaker, it may be mono, it may be stereo, and they're not going to have a well-tuned acoustically room. It's going to have hard surfaces, weird reflections, so you need to have a mix that translates. You can't rely on a given dynamic range or frequency response of the system. With Rift, it's a very narrow set and it's really high quality. You can rely on a really good frequency reproduction and a really high dynamic range to make more subtlety to your mix and really get the most out of it. I'm going to hand over to Tom to talk about how he leveraged this for the first-party content.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about Dream Deck. So Dream Deck came out with the Rift. You can download this for free on the store. And Dream Deck's been around for a while. This is what we've been showing at all the trade shows and all the demos. So I've worked on this I've remixed Dream Deck multiple times, just trying different things. Last year at Oculus Connect, I did a talk all about point source audio. And it was all talking about Dream Deck. The problem was with my talk is that you guys couldn't hear what I was talking about. So go to YouTube, check out my talk again, and check out Dream Deck and what I was doing on all the mixing on that. Some of the things I want to talk about was like, one of the big things I really want to talk about today is music in VR, and how do you deal with music in VR. So I've heard a lot of different opinions, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. I don't have the silver bullet. I have a cool system for doing it that I got to, and I'll go through the whole series of things, how I figured this out. So we'll get to that in a bit. But so we started off like Paper Town. So this is the demo, which was the little Paper Town on the table. And there was a ton of spatialized audio. There's, a little UFO that flies in and jet planes that fly around your head and everything else. And that was all really cool. And so that one, I just threw a stereo music track in there. And I'm like, this is okay. It's fine. Everything felt fine. But it wasn't great. It was just kind of off to me. So the next thing I did was there's the mirror room. So you've got the mirror on the wall. I'm just going to try to throw a couple of invisible speakers up on either side of the mirror. So it was a stereo music track again. Either side of the mirror music's come from. The problem was in that room, you're looking in the mirror most of the time, but if you turn around and you're facing back, all of a sudden the music's behind you. And that's just off. It's not a great user experience. It's immersive because you feel like you're in that room with music playing from the wall, but it's invisible speakers, so you have the phantom source problem. The thing I did after that was we did AudioBot. Now, AudioBot was this cool thing. This is our first audio demo. There was 2 robots, and they had a rubber duck. And the cool thing about this is like the robot squeezed the rubber duck, and it went around you in a circle. The problem with this is that when you watched it, everybody followed the whole robot around in a circle like this. So it didn't show spatialization at all because the sound was always right in front of you the entire time. And I was like, oh, okay, the learning experience, we'll get past this. But I really wanted to touch on what we did for music for this. This was like another step. We got 8 point sources here. So each part of the soundtrack was just like string stem, timpani stem, horn stem, and we put them around you in a circle. I think it was 9 point sources. This was cool. It felt like you're in the middle of an orchestra. And, it started to really sell what we could do with spatialized audio and music. Problem was, if you move this way, well, I'm standing right next to the timpani. If I moved over here, I'm right next to the string section. This is where we're having the phantom source issues, because you could hear where the sounds were coming from this spot here. There was nothing there. So we were just like, okay, well, this is closer. Like, all these are baby steps, like what we're getting closer and closer to how to get this done. There's no vertical here. Everything was on a flat plane. And it was cool. It was fine. It was like, it's that next step. Okay, next. Oh, okay. We also released the Oculus Rex team, which is our team up in Seattle, who did Dream Deck and Farlands. Farlands was another thing we worked on, and I want to take music a step further with this. Farlands is the whole thing was to try to spend about 10 to 15 minutes a day in VR, and it would just hold your attention this entire time. You were in an alien world, and you just wanted to be immersed on this alien world. Every sound in the game is spatialized, and it sounds really, really cool. Talking with one of the designers, Richard, we were talking about, let's do something cool with spatialized audio. He's like, let's put a mini game in where you're looking for insects. So here are the insects, and you only hear them in the game coming from different directions, like every once in a while in the game. So they're a little tiny point. So you use your hearing to figure out where the sound's coming from. You go in, and then you zoom in on that spot. And then you can take a picture, and then you've captured a bug. So this is a cool use of spatialized audio. It's just like moving things forward. Now, we were trying to figure out how to do the music. How am I going to take that next step to make music in VR just sound right? Because it's always been a problem. So what we did, I hired Jason Graves again, and Jason was the one who did the music for AudioBot. And I've been working with Jason for years. And I was like, Jason, you need to trust me. I need you to give me just all your music unmixed. I want to mix it because I'm going to be testing a lot of stuff out. And he's like, oh, okay, that's fine. And he's like, that's okay. I'll let you do this one. And I'm like, so he hands me just all the stems. We didn't want the music to be headlocked because I feel that pulls you out of every experience. I wanted the music to be non-diegetic. And plus you have to be able to move around the world. And I was trying to get away from that phantom source issue. So we came up with a thing called the compass system. So here you're standing in the world. You're always based at the center of the compass. We did a quad mix of the music with one track always north, one track always south, one west, one east. And you stood in the middle, so no matter where you're at, the north track was always north. So you could be facing any direction, and that track's always going to be placing from that way. While mixing, we had to come up with some rules to see how this works. So the distance to the listener is always constant, but the directionality is always the same. So the rules were, there is no front. I sent the stems off to one of our sound designers, Jacob, and he sent me I said I need a quad mix of this, and he sends me a quad mix back. It was a great mix. Everything sounded great, except it was made, like a TV mix or a movie mix, where the majority of the music, everything was in front, and there's, filler stuff in back. That was great, but let's say I'm in the game, I'm facing this way, and all of a sudden all the music's coming from over here, and there's some stuff over here. So this is like, you have to think about how you're mixing the music for VR. This is just a different concept. There is no front. So if you set up your room, and you just have like your quad speaker set up, you have to be able to face any direction in that room, and the mix has to sound good. Things we found, if an instrument drops out or one of the quad speakers goes low, you need to replace it with a different instrument in that spot. So there's always constant level in all the spots around you. Also, if the music drops or builds, you want it to build across all the channels. You don't want it just to come up in certain areas because it's going to be off. Because once again, you have no idea what direction the player is going to be facing at any time. Cool thing about this, it worked. It worked really well. We were super excited by this. I was like, I found a way to do like game music in VR, and it works fantastic. No phantom source problem, because if you stepped closer to the music or teleported closer, you never got closer to the music source because it always stayed a certain distance from you. So it had a nice quad mix. It worked really, really well. Super happy with it. Download Farlands, check it out, let me know what you think. Post it on boards. It just seems like it's the solution. It's like one of those things, I can only explain it as like it feels right. There was no, oh, this is odd. It's just like, no, I felt in this world, and I felt like I have a movie soundtrack going, and it just feels great. fully immersed the entire time. And so now we're like, what's the next step? How can we make this even better? So I had to go, hey, Pete, what can we do to make this better?
Yeah, and I love the music in Farlands. The quad mix really worked well, and that compass system was a really good idea. But it reminded me of another thing that we were investigating for the video side, and that is ambisonics. So I'm going to run through quickly what that is, just so everyone has a good idea what we're talking about here. So ambisonics is a 3D sound format. It fully describes a 3D sound scene. And it does this in a multi-channel audio format, but it's not like 5.1 or anything like that. It's just a 3D sound format. A way to envision this is like a skybox for audio. So you can have a lot of detail baked in there, pre-rendered, and it is just around the listener. And similar to the compass system, it's at a fixed distance, but it's not rotationally locked to the head. So you can fit an unlimited number of audio sources in your ambisonic. It can be all represented within this single multi-channel format. You can also have an unlimited number of reflections, so you can have a really complex, lush reverb that's baked into your ambisonics. It doesn't have to be computed at runtime. So the way that this is done is using a multi-channel format called B format, and shown here is first order, which has 4 channels. So the way this works is you've got the first channel, which is the omnidirectional sound pressure in the space. So that's just straight up mono, nothing complicated there. The next 3 channels add the directionality. So the first one is the directional sound pressure along the x-axis. The next one is the vertical axis, and then the third channel is the forward-back axis. So this fully describes the 3D sound scene. So how does this differ to point source audio? Because it sounds like it's a silver bullet that solves everything, but it's not as simple as that. So if you imagine you've got 3 point sources like these crickets around you, they're going to be very narrow, you're going to be able to pinpoint them, and you're going to have that phantom source issue, which can be good if there's an actual game object representing it, then it's no longer a phantom source, so sometimes you want that. But in ambisonics, you're going to have these 3 point sources, but when you convert it to B format, there's this smearing that happens, that these tight, narrow points become more like blurry blobs. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, and this can be really good depending on the application. So we're thinking this is a really great complement to point source audio, but not a replacement. So for non-diegetic content, it's a really good way to get it in the world and make it non-headlocked. So we're thinking music is a really great application of this technology, and also ambiences. So the other thing to think about is how to reproduce ambisonics in VR. So the common method is to have a virtual speaker array. And this is based on the theory that it was built on for speaker reproduction in the real world, that people would actually build these crazy speaker configurations around this perfect listening point and then play back the ambisonics to recreate the sound field. So the obvious approach in VR is to do the exact same and replace the real speakers with virtual speakers. So you have a lot of HRTF point sources reproducing the ambisonics. And this works quite well. So this was our starting point. We had this virtual speaker array, but the ambisonics was really blurry. And we couldn't work out if that was because of the B format limitations of first order or whether it was the speaker array. So I got to talking and I started a discussion with Ravish over at Oculus Research, and we collaborated and we worked out a novel approach to apply the HRTF directly to the ambisonics without any virtual speakers. And the effect of this is these blurry blobs get much narrower and there's much better externalization. So this is a really great way to play back ambisonics. It also solves a couple of other problems, that when you've got this array of speakers, you're processing a lot of HRTF point sources. This is a lot more computationally efficient because it's applied directly in the ambisonic domain. And it also has a really good frequency response, because another problem you run into with virtual speakers is you've got a lot of speakers reproducing the same signal, which can cause some high frequency cancellation. So it resolves that as well. So the other side of it, now that we know what it is and how to play it back, is how do you actually create these things? So there are 2 methods. The first one is recording it directly from the real world. And you can see this is an ambisonic microphone we've got set up in our studio in Seattle. And this captures the actual sounds of the space. It captures a real 3D sound scene. And the what's brilliant about this is it captures the real reflections of the room. If you've used like a convolution reverb from a real space, it's that taken to the next level because it's rotational. You can rotate your head and the space stays the same. And it's applied with HRTF.
I think that's Andy right there.
Right,
That's our only picture of one of our sound designers, Andy. It's really blurry, but he'll be really happy to be in here.
Yeah, you can see Andy in the background there. So these are really incredible. Capturing the diffuse field and all of those reflections perfectly with ambisonics makes a huge difference. And it's sort of like photorealistic when you consider graphics. It's hard to simulate that in real time. So I actually had a funny story where we'd captured something in the studio of just like a test video, and I was playing it back for Tom on Gear VR. And when it started, the person that was doing the recording just shut the door behind them. And Tom heard that and immediately took off the headset, thought someone had walked in the room. So just to give you an idea of the sort of the presence that you get just through audio.
That being said, that was recorded in the same room we were in.
That's true.
Like, so give me a little bit of a break on that one.
So the other approach is to generate it synthetically. And there's a really great tool that's free to download, and that's the Facebook 360 Spatial Workstation. And this is what we used for our content that we've been creating. And this is really incredible. You can load it up in your DAW and generate ambisonics. You can drop your sounds in there and then give them positions and even apply a reflection model. And that'll all get baked down into B format that you can play back with the audio SDK.
Yeah, and those guys gave a great talk yesterday. So.
Yeah.
I want to talk about ambisonic music mixes now. So we've been messing with this a lot. And so the cool thing about the ambisonic music mixes is, like, we were talking about the compass system, how there's 4 points around you. So that's streaming on 4 tracks, which is about as much as I want to give to a music track. Like Audiobot, we did 9. That's too many. But the cool thing about this is like how the ambisonics smear. So instead of having like a saxophone like right there and you have the phantom source problem, it kind of smears it around a little bit. So if you're doing a symphony and you have sections, then it just kind of smears it around, and you could have as many point sources as you want in this 4-track file. Sounds, you can start messing with mixes like verticality behind you and down low, and then you just have a lot of space. The cool thing we found about this is when we do music mixes with ambisonics, all of a sudden it opens up and it doesn't compete with all the other sounds that are going on in your game. So it's not fighting against it. It's occupying that same space as everything else. So, this. So I was actually going to explain what that was before it went. My slides are a little bit messed up there. So what this is going to be our new experience. This is, once again, built by the Oculus Rex team. And this is going to be out for gear, I think, in the next couple of weeks. This is going to be the first experience when you put on the gear headset, and it's kind of an instructional, like how everything works. Here's how to get used to VR. They did an amazing job. And Michael Bross, one of our sound designers down at Menlo Park, who's here right now, did all the music for it. Michael did a great job. He's sending me the music and like stereo tracks. I'm like, Michael, this is amazing. This sounds perfect for this game. I go, how about this? Mix this in ambisonic. And he's like, what? No? It was just like one of those, like, what am I doing? And I'm like, welcome to Oculus. Here's what we're doing. And so we had to mix it all in ambisonics. And so it's a typical game mix. I believe there was 14 different pieces of music, and with the 4 tracks, and so there's crossfading. Some of the things loop, and other things came in like you would actually do game music, and it's all running on the gear along with sound effects in the background. No problem. This stuff is not heavy, doesn't cost a ton of CPU usage, and it just sounded amazing when it's done. So all this stuff's available now, so try it out. It just sounds great. We're super happy with the results. So next, I want to talk about ambisonic ambiences. So here's the slide that was supposed to be before. There we go. So prologue, and then the video would play after this. You can see how pretty it is. So I'll get back to ambisonic ambience mixes. So we did not have ambisonics for Farlands, and I really wish we did. Pete, you guys have to work much faster. So what I ended up doing for ambiences in Farlands, since you could teleport all around the world, was there's just individual emitters everywhere. And there's sky, and then it rains, so I've got those, and I've got like rain emitters for when sounds hit the ground. There's waterfalls, there's just everything all around you. It's a gazillion emitters all over the place, and it sounds fantastic. But using ambisonics could have been way easier, because in one 4-track mix, I could have put all that bed. So I could have the rain, I could have the waterfall that's over the ledge there, I could have the stream behind you, I could have wind blowing around you, and that would only be 4 tracks. Super cool. And then on top of that, to really bring it to life, I do individual point source on top of it. I'm working on something like this now, and it's working out really, really well. So like this for the insect game, you have individual insects and all the animals. And let's say there's actually a cave behind you, and there's like water dripping. So since they're visible, I would put individual point sources on each one of those raindrops. And this all together is a wonderful package, because like it smears so that waterfall is coming from this area over here, and it feels very natural. And it's just super fantastic how all this stuff works. I'm afraid to hit the next slide because I don't know what it is. Oh, there we go. Free Ambisonic Ambience Library. So we have been recording, Christian down at our Dallas office, have been recording ambiences for a while using different ambisonic mics. All these are up on the website now. It's kind of like a little starter set for people to get used to using ambisonics. There's awesome things like, here we go, oh, one more time, like this parking garage and the inside of an office. But there is also things like parks and streams, and he actually recorded ambisonics inside of a flying 737, which I don't know how I got away with that, but I can't imagine pulling that out like in the middle of a plane ride and not having any air marshals come up to you and ask what you're doing. So next we want to talk about reverb.
Yeah, so we were talking about how ambisonics can capture unlimited amount of detail with the reverb. But you could also just capture reverb itself with ambisonics as an impulse response. And this is something you can find online. There's actually captures you can find freely available to experiment with this. So this isn't really something that's like a fully fledged feature yet, but you can actually just cobble it together with existing functionality. And I was playing around with this in Fmod Studio. So I dropped in just a B format 4-channel ambisonic impulse response on a convolution reverb, and then piped the output of that straight into our ambisonic spatializer. And it sounds incredible. Now you've got this head-tracked reverb, so you can actually rotate around, and it can be asymmetric, and it sounds like you're really in the space, and it's so much more detailed and lush than any sort of synthetic reverb that you could generate. So this is a really interesting direction that this could head in, and it also opens the door to separating reflection modeling from spatialization. So it could potentially diversify the market a bit, that you could plug and play with different sort of spatializers. Like you could have a reflection modeling from some company and then a spatializer from another, and really be an interchange format to really describe the 3D scene and then spatialize the 3D scene in separate steps. Another future direction for this is taking it beyond first order. So I showed you before, this is the pattern for the 4-channel first order signal. But then you can extend that to second and third order. So second order being 9 channels and third order being 16 channels. And it's this n-squared relationship. So the higher you get in the order, the channels are growing very, very quickly. So the actual level of detail required to get the spatial accuracy equivalent to point source audio is something that's hotly debated. There's some people claiming that third and fourth order gets pretty close to the free field, and others that say you need as high as 9 or 10th order. At that point, you're talking 100 or more channels of audio, which is a huge amount of data to be capturing, to be transferring, to be storing, And so we're running into the limits of what we could really practically do. But it's exciting that there's a lot of future direction for this to move in, and it's a really extensible technology. You can see pictured here, this is a high-order ambisonic mic that we've got up in Seattle, and Andy took it out to the field to do some recordings. And so this allows you to capture the real world in really high detail and get those reflections and all of that with really high spatial accuracy.
And that rainbow sounds amazing.
Yes. It's a good photo, that one. So I hope you've got a rough idea of what Ambisonics is, and it's available right now for Wise and Fmod. And Unity will be coming soon. It's a bit tricky, but we're working on that one. But yeah, you can use it right now. It's really high performance. It works great on Gear VR, but it works great on Rift as well. We think this is a really good tool to add to your tool belt and to use in combination with point source audio. The last thing we want to touch on is the mixing in 3D and the coloration. So I actually took a capture here because this is a topic that comes up time and time again, and it kind of goes against intuition. So we really want to just address it directly, that when you drop a spatializer in your mix gets colored, and the immediate reaction is disgust, I think, that it's not what you're expecting, it's not how audio processing usually works. So I've got a plot here that shows 4 cardinal directions with just some white noise passing through our spatializer. And you can see some pretty crazy coloration happening here. There's like 10 or 20 dB notches in this graph. And that really is going to heavily color your sound. And that can seem like a bad thing. But what that does is actually provides the spatialization. This was captured off a real human subject. So for this person, this will spatialize perfectly. And there's no real coloration. That's just the features of the head and the ears, the pinna and the shoulders. Like, that's how the sound interacts with your head. And when you've got headphones on, this simulates that really well. And it's actually not so much a new problem as a solution to an old problem. That anyone that's familiar with mixing will have run into an issue where you've got different instruments or different components that are competing at given frequency ranges. Say you've got your vocals competing with the guitars. And then when you mix that down to, say, stereo, you've got to heavily EQ it so they can both come through in the mix. Well, this gives you a new tool because you don't have to separate them so much in frequency that you can separate them in physical space. And you can put them in different locations and you can hear them come through in the mix. So it's really given you so much more to work with. If you just embrace the coloration, you can actually have all of this extra space to mix in and fit so much more detail in.
Yeah, this is the thing that really gets to me sometimes is just hearing people complain about this. Is just like, quit mixing the 2D audio, which sounds really just in your ear and just unnatural when you're in VR, with the spatialized audio. That's why I always push for spatializing all the sounds. Then they're all going through the HRTF system, and then everything is placed in the world around you. And so it's just, I get so excited too. So I get angry and then excited. Because I'm so excited by this technology, because like I have so much space to mix. I'm not like ripping sections out of sounds to make them fit so well. I mean, I still EQ, I'm a sound designer. That's what I do, I can't help it. But don't try to dial this stuff out, because the more you dial this stuff out, you lose the spatialization. Like all the sounds all of a sudden just get closer and closer, and then it becomes headlock stereo again if you don't have this EQ in it. So seeing people try to smooth this out, it's just like you have to embrace this and just spatialize everything, and then it sounds fantastic once you're in that place, and you'll feel, everything's very immersive, and it just feels like you're there. Once you have the 2D audio and headlocked, that's when you're losing the immersion and it just feels fake.
Yeah, I think something to think about is when you're in VR, it's virtual reality, and you've got to think about what you're simulating. And when you do headlock stereo, you're simulating headphones, that the person's wearing headphones and you're simulating headphones. It's like putting smudges on the left and right eye and you're looking through smudgy glasses. Like, it's not adding to the experience of the reality, the virtual reality simulation. And the other thing to look at is when you look at this graph, it's pretty wild, these variations. But over the all of the directions, you can see that all the frequencies are represented. And so when you drop it in the mix and you hear some of the frequencies drop out, when you turn your head, those frequencies are going to come back. But it's really hard to appreciate that and just understand it intuitively, which is why it's so important we added it to the VST. So now you can actually hear that in context. So you can drop it in your DAW and then rotate your head around and hear the coloration in context with the head tracking, which is where it really comes to life, and you can appreciate the spatialization and the directionality that you're getting from this.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, all of this is available right now. You can get the Ambisonics, we've got the shared reverb, we've got the VST on the website, we've got the Ambisonic sample pack. All of that can be downloaded. It's all free. Oh, lip sync as well. Try it out, share what you're doing, talk about it. This is all new stuff. We're still discovering it ourselves. We are telling you how it works, but we're not trying to be too prescriptive. We're all still learning, and let's just keep talking and blogging and discovering this all together.
Yeah, there's some great Facebook groups. JP runs an awesome one that I learn stuff from that all the time. And so it's just great, just whatever you find out, just share it, because the more we share this knowledge, the more this technology will grow. And this is just going to continue to get better and better. I think Abrash was even touching on stuff today in the keynote, because he's super excited about audio too. And I just have to say how awesome it is working for Oculus and how much they care about audio, because they know how important it is to the immersive experience.